Let's look at the carbon cycle. So I posted a video on this a few days ago. Key steps here. If you just want to memorize it, it's always good to start with the air. That's what you've got, carbon dioxide in the air. So that's the gas form of carbon. That goes into plants by photosynthesis. It comes back out by respiration. Don't forget people always forget plants respire as well. They do respire, all living things respire. They get eaten by animals. Plants get eaten by animals. Both plants and animals can die and decay. So when they're dead, their bodies decay and get broken down. When they get broken down, that's done by decomposers. These are microorganisms that feed on the dead matter. And for them to survive, they need to also respire as well, because they're obviously living things as well. So they release that carbon back into the air. So that's like a mini cycle there. But we've also got fossil fuels here at the bottom, because this is fossilization that happens with both animals and plants. If they get buried, if they get put under a high amount of pressure for millions and millions of years, it can lead to them turning into fossil fuels, which we learn about in chemistry. And for fossil fuels, what we've been doing recently, when I say recently, I mean like the last few hundred years, we've been burning them in like factories and cars just to help with the industry, and that's been releasing that carbon dioxide back into the air. So that's the second loop. When organisms respire, is it returned to the atmosphere? Yep. When they respire, so they take in CO2 by photosynthesis, they respire the same as us. They give out CO2 back out into the atmosphere. It's just they take in CO2 for photosynthesis, and they give out oxygen for photosynthesis. When they respire, they do the opposite. They use oxygen for respiration and give out carbon dioxide, just like us. Okay, so let's look at this first question. So in your exams, it's obviously not going to be drawn like this exactly. There's loads of different versions of the carbon cycle that you can have. This is just one version with the main points in it. So here we got another question where it's a different version. So you can see, look here, the fossil fuels are on the right, animals at the bottom. Is all over the place, but try and just remember the main points and the main stages and try and figure it out. So this is kind of, it's not even rotated. It's completely different orientation, but it's the same main things. So name the processes shown by arrows X and Y. What do you guys think? So that's coming out of the microorganism there. That's what we call the decomposers. And we've got fossil fuels coming out here. So we got, exactly, combustion and respiration. So we're basically talking about this arrow here and this arrow here, respiration and combustion. So first one is respiration. Second one is combustion. Amazing. Describe the part played by algae in this carbon cycle. So that's a 3-mark question. Algae, which section is that corresponding to? So this is corresponding to the, not animals. Algae would be corresponding to the plants section. Yeah, because they've got chlorophyll like plants as well. So yeah, it's to do with photosynthesis. That's 1 mark. So we can say, what about photosynthesis? We can say photosynthesis absorbs carbon dioxide. Yep, good. So they photosynthesize. Photosynthesis absorbs CO2. What else can we say? They respire. Good. Respiration. What did I say about respiration? Respiration does what? It releases carbon dioxide. Yep. Good. So that's 2 of the points. We've got 1 more. So you can talk about anything else that plants do. So we've talked about this, but look at all the arrows, all the other arrows. We got 1 there, we got 1 there, we got 1 there. So we can say, yeah, consumed by animals, or we could say fed on by decomposers, or turned into fossil fuels. Actually, in this one, you can't talk about fossil fuels because they haven't got an arrow going from algae to fossil fuels. So you actually wouldn't get a mark for saying that one. But you can say any of the other ones. So going to animals, we can say eaten by animals. Does everyone understand? Can plants decompose? Yes, they definitely do. Once a plant dies, they decompose. In tropical rainforest, process X is much faster than in most other habitats. So they're talking about process X, that's respiration of microorganisms. Why would that be much faster in a rainforest, do you think? Did not get the last point. Eaten by animals. The arrow here, the carbon goes to animals because the algae, the plants, would get eaten by animals. So the carbon goes into the animals. So we're saying a lot of rain. Yeah, it's a damp conditions, we could say. There could be a lot of microorganisms. It's warmer as well in the rainforest, so you could say any of those. Warmer conditions, damp. Conditions as well. Okay, you could also say there's a lot of microorganisms, or you could say, yeah, a lot of plants to decay as well. So that's why it would happen faster. Okay, one more question on the carbon cycle here. So this is like from a completely different question here. The carbon in dead bean plants is returned to the atmosphere by the carbon cycle. Okay, so this is just asking about plants. Describe this part of the carbon cycle for 4 marks. What can we say? So it's literally asking for the 4 arrows coming out of plants. But it's only asking about dead plants. So we don't mention all the arrows. You can't talk about photosynthesis here because dead plants don't photosynthesize. They don't respire either. So what can we talk about here then? Decomposers, yeah, it's all to do with decomposers. So this is talking about, so it's not talking about this arrow, it's not talking about this arrow. It's talking about this arrow. So they get eaten by decomposers and then it goes back into the air because it's asking about how it's returned to the atmosphere. So how does it go back into the air? Death and decay, and then the microorganisms respire. So to get the 4 marks, you would say microorganisms, or you can say decomposers. Feed on the dead material. So that causes decay. 2 marks. And then you say the decomposers respire and they release CO2. Okay, hope that makes sense. So let's move away from the carbon cycle now. Right, next one is about hormones. What is a hormone for 3 marks? What do you guys think? Decay. You don't read. Decay is kind of covered in this point as well. Them feeding on dead material, that is called decay. So technically, you don't even need to say decay. This covers 2 marks. So mentioning the decomposers is 1 mark. Then mentioning decay or them feeding on the dead material is the 2nd mark. So you could do it either way around if you want. Right, so we got a chemical messenger. Yes, 1 mark. Remember, this is a 3 mark question, so 1 mark for chemical messenger. 2 other marks. Released into the blood. Yep, that's a good one to say. And then a 3rd mark. Secreted by glands. Perfect. Secreted just means released, produced and released. Regulate, I wouldn't say that. Regulate body processes, I wouldn't say that. That wouldn't get you a mark. Yes, you can answer a question like that. Yeah. Name 2 hormones that control blood glucose concentration. Good. Insulin and glucagon. Well done, guys. This and is already there. Insulin and glucagon, not glycogen. Let me write the differences. People always get this confused. So we got in controlling blood glucose, there are 2 hormones involved, insulin and glucagon. Okay, so insulin, what that does is the opposite of what glucagon does. Insulin turns glucose into glycogen. So this is where it gets confusing, the names. So glucagon is a hormone. Glycogen is a stored form of glucose. That's the difference. Glucagon, the hormone, does the opposite of what insulin does. That turns glycogen back into glucose. That's the opposite. Okay, so don't get those confused. That's a very common mistake. That's a good way to remember it. The glucose is gone. Glucagon. G-O-N for gone means the glucose is gone because, wait, does that work? Glucagon turns glycogen into glucose. So I don't think that works. Anyway, insulin causes blood glucose to decrease. This one does the opposite. It causes blood glucose to increase. Let's go back to the question, see what it's asking. All right, so figure 5 shows a change in concentration of glucose in the blood of a healthy person following a meal. So they've just eaten here. Explain how negative feedback controls the blood glucose concentration during the first 1.5 hours after the meal. So the meal's eaten here. 1.5 hours later, that's going to be this all the way up to there. We need to explain. For 4 marks. So 2 main things to talk about here. 3 main things, I'd say. There's this part here, call that 1. Then this part here, we call that 2. And then we got this part here. So see that? It goes up, down, and then back up again. That's negative feedback. What do you guys think? So first, let's talk about the rise. So you should try and use the actual data in the graph to explain this. So we can say, yep, let's see what you guys are saying. Blood glucose after meal peaks at half an hour. Increases. Yep. Okay. So let's talk about that. So the first part is increasing. Why does that increase? Number 1. So blood glucose increases from about 0 to 0.5 hours, I'd say. It's because, yeah, they've just eaten food, so the glucose from the meal has entered the blood. Okay, then we've got it going down on number 2. Why is it going down? Would you say carbohydrates? Yeah, the carbohydrates don't enter the blood. It's the glucose. The carbohydrates is in the meal. That gets broken down to glucose and then that gets put into the blood. So yeah, good. At this point, the pancreas detects the high levels and then it releases insulin, because remember, insulin is what causes blood glucose to decrease. So the pancreas detects high levels and releases insulin. And the insulin causes the blood glucose to decrease. Yep, so that's about from half an hour to 1 hour. So we'll say from 0.5 hours to 1 hour. Then we've got our final bit. Yep. So we talked about the insulin. So what's that last bit going to be? Why is it going back up again? Yep. So that's when you start talking about glucagon. Well done. So now this must be the normal level. 5 is probably the normal level, isn't it? That's what it's trying to keep it at. So now it's gone below 5. The pancreas detects low levels of blood glucose. So it releases glucagon. releases. Detects. Pancreas detects low levels of glucose, so it releases glucagon. And then that's the one that increases blood glucose. And that's happening from around 1 to 1.5. So it's always good to try and use the data that they've given, the values, whenever they give you like a graph. Okay. Well done. On to the next one. In humans, chromosome X and chromosome Y are the sex chromosomes. Most cells in the human body contain 2 sex chromosomes. Which type of cell does not have 2 sex chromosomes? Yeah, it's going to be red blood cells, because red blood cells don't even have a nucleus. They're technically not cells. They don't have a nucleus. So they won't have any chromosomes in them. All of these are body cells, so they will have 2 pairs. They will have 2 sex chromosomes. A gamete, if it was a gamete, so if it said sperm cell or egg cell, then you would tick that, but they don't have any of that. So yeah, you're supposed to realize that red blood cells aren't actually cells. Next one, what's the answer? Ooh, we're getting a mix of answers here. How many other chromosomes are there in most human body cells? It says other than sex chromosomes. So no, it's actually not 46. 46 is a full set with sex chromosomes. So what would it be without sex chromosomes? Exactly, it'll be 44. It'll be 44. So it's not asking how many pairs, it's asking how many chromosomes, and they've highlighted other. How many other chromosomes are there apart from the 2 sex chromosomes? So you just do 46 minus 2, which is 44. Does that make sense? Did I say that again? Okay. No? Okay, so normal human cells have 46 chromosomes, which is basically 23 pairs, right? So you got pair 1, then you got pair 2, then you got pair 3, and so on, all the way up to 23. The 23 is the XX or the XY. So you've got 46, but this is saying apart from the sex chromosomes. So they're basically saying apart from these, how many have you got? So you've got 22 pairs. So imagine counting 2 for each one. You got 22 times 2, which is 44. Make sense? It's a bit of a trick question. No, it's not triple. This is, I think, it is AQA combined for, I think it's a specimen paper. Right. Next one. Which part of the eye is affected by Stickler syndrome? So this one is just for triple, because you don't need to know about the eye if you're doing combined. It's an inherited disorder that causes damage to the eye. You see black spaces in your visual image. So just this section here is triple, the rest of it is combined. Which part is it? It's not the iris, unfortunately. It's the retina. The retina is the part that actually picks up light. So the cells which are sensitive to light, the light receptors are all in the retina. Okay, next one. This is relevant to everyone. So we've got this syndrome, and it's caused by a dominant allele. Figure 6 shows the inheritance of Stickler syndrome in 2 families. So we've got like a family tree diagram here. And we've got a key here. Affected is the shaded ones, and unaffected are the unshaded ones. So So use the following symbols in your answer. So dominant allele, we're going to use a capital A for that, and recessive is small a. Explain why none of the children of persons 7 and 8 have Stickler syndrome. So 7 and 8. Let's go back to our diagram. 7 and 8 is here. Why would you say none of their children have the disease? Because remember, if it's not shaded, it means they don't have the disease. Saying recessive is not enough. You have to say a bit more. There we go. The parents don't have it. So look at that. Their parents are unaffected. If their parents are unaffected, remember, this is a dominant allele. Dominant means you have it. If you have the gene, you have the disease. So that means these parents, what is their genotype? What would their alleles be? Parents are not carriers. They're not carriers, no. You can't have a carrier for a dominant disease. You can only have carrier for recessive diseases. They're homozygous recessive. Okay, look. These parents, 7 and 8, they can only be this. They can only be small a, small a, small a, small a. They can't be big A, small a. They definitely are not big A, right? Because they don't have the disease. They're not big A, small a, because that would mean they have the disease. Because this disease is dominant. The only way they don't have the disease is if both are recessive. Homozygous means both alleles are the same. Heterozygous means they're both different. So because the parents don't have the disease, that means they only have the recessive genes, which are the genes that don't have the syndrome. So there's impossible for their children to get the disease because there's no way of them passing a capital A to their children. Does that make sense? Yeah, 2 has a disease. Okay, let me go back where someone just asked, 2 has the disease, so why can't they pass it through? Because 2, yes, they have the disease, but they probably are big A, small a. This person has to be small a, right? So what's happened is one of their children got the big A, the other child just got the small a and the small a. That's why 7 is recessive. That's why they don't have the disease. Yeah, if 2 was big A, then yes, then 7 would have to have the disease. That's true. But the fact that the person doesn't have the disease means they can't be big A. Does that make sense? How would you know? You work it out from what they've given you. They're telling you this is the situation. You work it out from that. You can't. It's not a case of you figuring out the tree diagram. They know, they've told you in the question, and you're supposed to figure it out. That the only way for this tree diagram to work is if this is a big A. What if the other person of one parent was AA and the other was big A, small a? Yeah, if one person was big A, and the other parent was big A, small a, then their children will definitely have the disease. There's no combination where you can have a small a, isn't it? So they'll definitely have the disease. Okay? So, to answer the question, explain why none of the children have this syndrome is because parents do not have we'll say the big A allele. It's okay to say that because in the question, they've basically told you you can use big A for the dominant allele. So you can say, yeah, they don't have the big A allele, therefore can't pass it down to children. Okay, I'll finish around 9:15, guys. So about 15 minutes left. Person 12 marries person 18. Use a Punnett square to find the probability that their first child will be female with Stickler syndrome. 12 and 18. Where's 12 and 18? That's here and here, okay? So first thing to do is to figure out what their genotypes are. What do you guys think? What are the genotypes of 12 and 18 based on all this information? So we got big A, small a. Yeah, that's what it'll be. So this is big A, small a, small a, small a. So let me tell you how you know. This is because the person doesn't have the disease. This disease is dominant. It says so in the question. So if you have a dominant disease, the only way a person doesn't have the disease is if both recessive alleles are present, right? Because if they had this, that means they do have the disease. If they have this, it means they have the disease. Does that make sense? That one's the more straightforward one. That's small a, small a. It has to be, can't be anything else. So 12, this is the one where people are asking, why is it not big A, big A? Because now you need to look at the parents. This parent number 5, can only be small a, because of what I said earlier. The only way you can't have the disease is if both are small a's. And this parent has to be big A, small a. Again, because if you go up again, that's small a, small a. This, it doesn't matter if it's big A, small a, or big A, big A. There's definitely going to be a small a in number 6, isn't there? Because remember, this is a combination of this person's allele and this person's allele. So this person will definitely be a big A and a small a. That's the only way you can combine it. It can't be small a, because they have the disease. It can't be big A, because they have to get a small a from this parent. Then you take it another step. You know this person's big A, small a. This is small a, small a. There's no way this person can be big A, because this person can't give them a big A. Does that make sense? Yeah, okay, good. How's the other one not got the disease? This person's not a child. This is another person who's come from another family and married this person. This isn't a child. They're only a child if they're connected with those 2 lines. Okay? Okay, good. So the question was asking for a Punnett square. It was Punnett square of big A, small a, and small a, small a. So let's do that. Oops. So that's going to be this, small a, big A, small a, small a, small a. There's a trick in this question. What's the answer to the question? What's the probability then? Probability the first child with the syndrome. It's not a half. It's a trick question. Read it carefully. I know why loads of people would put half here, because 2 out of 4 have got the disease, but then it says their first child will be a female with Stickler syndrome. So you half it again. So it'll be 25%. All right. Any questions on that quickly? It is cruel. I agree. Why is female half? Because there's a 0.5% of this person being a male or female, right? So the probability halves again. I'm not going to lie, that probably got a lot of people. I had to read it twice to get that. Do you want to see the diagram again here? Take a quick look. All right, let's move on. I'll put all of this on YouTube, guys, if you've missed stuff. So next question, we got something on adaptation. So we've got a camel here. A camel lives in a hot, dry desert. One adaptation of this is temperature tolerance. This means the animal's body temperature can rise up to 6 degrees before it starts to sweat. So it doesn't start to sweat like a few degrees higher. It takes 6 degrees. How does this help the camel survive in the desert? Yep. Less sweating, so less water loss. So less water loss. That's all 1 mark actually. So what's the second mark for? Not long lashes. No. Can I change pen color? Yes. Yeah, because there's not much water in the desert. Yeah, because it's surviving in the desert, right? So it's a bit stating the obvious. So that, sorry, I gotta say so because there's not much water in the desert. That's why it's important for them to conserve water. Okay. It's not about storing water, no. Well, it kind of is. They lose less water, so it stays in their body. But it's asking, why is that relevant to a desert? That's why you need to mention this bit. 3 more adaptations. Fat store produces little urine and very dry feces and a hard mouth. Why are those useful for the camel? So first of all, fat store, why would that be good? Yep, more stores energy. So yeah, in a desert, there's very little food, so it needs to store energy for later. Next one, yes, it reduces water loss. It conserves water in the body. It stops the water it's storing from evaporating. It's not to do with evaporating because it's talking about the urine. So I don't think you'd get a mark for saying that. And the last one is to, yeah, it can eat not just plants because you don't need like a hard mouth for that. It's to eat hard food, exactly. Because in the desert, the food's likely to be very dry and hard. So it can eat hard, dry food. Good. Next question, nervous system. So we've got reflex arc here. Name parts P and Q. Let me zoom in here. What do we have? P and Q. Not a receptor. Yeah. Synapse and relay neuron. I've got a whole lesson on this on YouTube, guys. This one here runs through everything you need to know for the nervous system. So check that out. And also I'll be posting today's live here. So go to live exam walkthrough replays. I've got past lives on hormones, glands, nervous system, and another one on biopaper 2 that we did last week. So if you want to revise, you can go into that. You can print off the sheet, the exam sheet, and do it with the paper. So if you want more practice on that topic, just do that. Okay. Yeah, I do. It's on my bio, so you can go onto it and look at it. It's got all the past lives that I've done. So you guys are right. We got synapse for P, and Q is the relay. Yep. Relay neuron. You have to say neuron. You can't just say relay here because it's not clear that they haven't told you it's a neuron. So that means this one here, so the top one and the bottom one, top one must be the sensory neuron because that's going from the receptor, and the bottom one must be the motor neuron because it's going to the muscle, it seems like. Compare how information is transferred along the neuron with how information is transferred across the gap P. There's no such thing as a reflex neuron. No, there's a relay neuron, not a reflex neuron. Relay neurons are used in reflex responses. If you're confused about that, honestly, watch that YouTube video. It covers everything. It should make sense if you watch it. It's only about 5 minutes. Yep, good. So we've got electrical impulses that goes through neurons. Impulses go through neurons. And then for the synapse, the way that passes through is diffusion of neurotransmitter. Diffusion of neurotransmitter through the synapse. Can you say chemicals are neurotransmitters? Yes, you can. That should be fine. Chemical should be fine. Chemical transmitters is fine. Yes. Why does a conscious action take longer than reflex action? What's the reason for that? This is combined, guys. Everyone needs to know this. Because it passes through the brain. Yes. Because it passes through the brain. Yeah, reflex doesn't. So the way we know it, I think someone asked, how do we know it's a reflex? It tells you here. It says shows a reflex arc, and there's a relay neuron involved, so it must be a reflex. If it was a normal response, it would go to the brain. If you make spelling mistakes, will you still get the marks? Most of the times you will, if it sounds like what you're trying to say, then it should be fine. But just be careful with like the key scientific words. Just make sure you try and spell them correctly. Don't make it, if it's like small errors, it should be fine. But big errors, if it sounds like something else, then you might lose marks. Yes, I am live tomorrow, 8:30. All right, last questions. Information travels at 120 meters per second in neurons. Calculate the time it will take to travel 1.6 meters along the neuron. Another cheeky question because this is a physics equation. We've got distance, we got speed. So we're actually using speed equals distance over time here. This is an AQA question. So what do we need to do? We need to do the distance divided by speed to rearrange that. This is the triangle. So time is equal to 1.6 divided by 120. So you get, yep, thank you. You get 0.013. But that's not the final answer because that's seconds. The question's asking in milliseconds. How do you convert seconds into milliseconds? Yeah, I will give this document. Every YouTube video I put, guys, I put the document that I'm doing in the comments so you can download it. You can print it out and try it yourself while you watch the video. You will times by 1,000. Yes. So milli anything. So even if it's like millimeters to meters, you divide by 1,000. And if you're going the other way, you do times by 1,000. So you times that by 1,000, 1, 2, 3, that's going to give you 13. I think this was 0.3, so it's 13.3 milliseconds. Okay, doctors tested people of different ages to time how long it took between touching a sharp pin and the arm muscle contracting. Here we've got the data here. Describe the relationship between age and the time for the muscle to contract. So it's basically asking you to describe this trend for 2 marks. What can you say? Not inversely proportional. You can't even say directly proportional. Don't say directly proportional for this. Directly proportional means if you double this, this will double. That's not true. Look at this, 30 to 60, that's doubling. This isn't doubling. So you can't say directly proportional. You just need to say, yeah, the older you are, the longer it takes. But that's only 1 mark. What do you guys think the second mark's for? So the older the age, the longer the time. What's the second mark for? No, it's not to add values. Yeah, it's to do with the difference. Exactly. Look at here. It's only going up by about 1 or 2. It's going up by 2. Here, it's going up by 6. So, well, that's going up by around 1. That's going up by around 2. That's going up by 6. So you would say that the rate of increase is increasing. So we can say at an increasing rate. Okay. All right. Well done, guys.